What you guys, what is the best Dell Optiplex for gaming and which Dell Optiplex should you buy? There's tons of people that ask me that question all the time, and there's lots of Dells available on eBay. So which one should you choose? So that's what we're going to go through in this video. So let's break it down and try to make this a lot more easier to understand, because there is Dell Optiplex 7010s, 3020s, 790s, 3060s. There's all different types and the list goes on. So which ones should you choose? Now, what we're going to go through here is we're going to break it down into, say, for instance, gaming. If you want to game on a Dell Optiplex here, you really want to steer clear of these ultra small form factors and small form factor versions, and also these micro versions here. You don't want to be buying those, okay? Now, if you're looking to game, you probably want to go for one of the bigger MT versions, which are called MT. These are desktop versions, which you can literally see here. The size of them are a lot more wider, like this. These are the ones you want to aim for. So what version should you go for? What does that mean? But there's different versions, as in what type of CPUs and what sort of generation and what sort of chipset on the motherboard and how many slots on the board. All of that stuff can be found out with some data sheets, and I'll show you how to find those and look up and find out what's inside of these Dell Optiplexes. Now remember, some of the memory inside here could be swapped out for slower types of memory, so bear that in mind. And also you might only get small amounts of memory in some of them. As you can see here, some of these have got 8 gigs, some of them have got 4 gigs, and some of them have got 16 gigs. It just depends. So just bear that in mind when you're looking. So let's first go on to this form factor size here. Small form factor, you don't really want that, because that's going to cause you a load of headaches. Now, if you do want one of these smaller ones for your desk and you want to put in a graphics card, you can put graphics cards in these. Again, 1050 Ti or 1650 will fit in here. As long as they're a small form factor, low profile card, they will fit in there. Again, you want to try to get the right version. Mini Tower is also a nice version to go for. So if that's the version you're looking for, which is these ones, put in Mini Tower. If you're looking for 16 gigabytes, then also put the tick in for 16 gigabytes. And this will go down and start to get rid of all of the other stuff that you're not looking for. Windows really doesn't really matter so much, because you can install that. If it's got a Windows 7 sticker on it, you'll be able to upgrade for free to Windows 10. So you don't have to worry about that too much. But if you do want it on there, you can put that tick in. The processor is where you're looking for next. So you can see here, I normally generally aim for an i5 or an i7 if I'm going to play games. i5 is probably the bare minimum you want to go for, and you don't want to go for some of the earlier generations like the Gen 2s and the Gen 1 versions and things like that, because they're just too old and you're going to struggle. So I would say try to aim for the Gen 4 versions if you're going to go for these, okay? Now also, solid state drives is not a problem. You can add these in yourself. And again, if you want to get your hard drive in here, try to aim for, say, for instance, a terabyte. You'll see sometimes, 500 gig hard drives in here, and that's just the norm. So you can change this sort of stuff and upgrade this at a later date yourself. You really want to try to do that yourself, because when you're allowing, say, for instance, a PC repair shop to do this for you, they're just going to tack on a load of money for SSDs and hard drives and things like that, and memory. 16 gigs of memory is where you want to aim for if you want to game on these things. So what version should you go for? Let's talk about the right version to go for. The versions I would look for are the 7020 and the version 9020. They're the two main versions that you want to be looking for on the Dell Optiplex series. If you look here at the Dell Optiplex here, this is the 9020 version, and you can see here these are the versions that you'll see in size. These is MT, small form factor, ultra small form factor, and then you've got the micro small form factor. You can see the difference in size. You want to try to steer clear from these here. If you're going to buy one of these for your desk, depending on what you're trying to do, if you're gaming, obviously This is probably the lowest size of gaming that you can get, which will probably take a 1050 Ti in here, or even a 1650 low profile graphics card. But really you want to try to steer clear of these and go with this big one. Okay, so let's move on to the specs here. If you look here, 4th generation CPUs in here. You want to aim for i5 or i7, which will be i7 4790, or you'll get the i5 version, which is really nice for gaming as well. 3.6 gigahertz on the i7, 8 meg cache for these versions. And also the good thing about these is the chipset is an Intel Q87 Express chipset, which also gives you up to 32 gigabytes of memory on here. It's got 4 slots, 4 DIMM slots on the board, which means you can put 4 sticks of RAM in here, up to 32 gigabytes. So if you want to use it for a bit of video editing for an i7 version, you could do that as well. 1600 megahertz is also DDR3. That's what you're aiming for here. Some of the earlier versions are only 1333, and some of these versions you see here may have had the memory upgraded, but they're only using the cheaper, slower memory because that's what they've got to hand. So just bear that in mind when you buy these. They're not all going to have this speed of memory in them. Sometimes they've been using memory they've got from other machines they've pulled out and stick in here, so they could be slower. So just check that with the seller. Also, you can see here with the USB ports, you get a few more USB ports with this version here. So looking at this here, the power supplies on these are generally about 290 watts of power. You're probably going to end up having to take that out and change it. They do have proprietary parts in all of these builds. So let's take a look at the 7020 here. This is another version. I would generally go for an i5 or an i7 on this type. It's got 8 megabytes of cache on here. Again, speed will be up to 1600 megahertz. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get that memory in your machine, because that could have already been robbed out and put in there 1333 megahertz in there. So just bear that in mind, okay? And it does also support 4 DIMM slots on this version, which is important because that means you can upgrade memory and you can put more memory in here. Again, maximum memory for the 7020 is only 16 gigabytes. So the 9020 is 32 gigabytes. The maximum is 16 gigabytes on the 7020. And again, the chipset on these as well, you can check those out for the chipsets on here and it will tell you. Now, if you're looking at the 3020, which you're probably going to see a lot more of, and these are probably going to be a bit more cheaper, but you'll see these on eBay as well. Again, the actual chipset for this is H81 chipset, and there's only 2 DIMM slots on the board. That means only 2 sticks of memory. You can run up to 16 gigabytes of RAM on these, and it can run up to 1600 megahertz on these. Some of them may vary. Just be very careful when you're buying these types of machines. But normally, I would say these are probably the 3 that I would buy. I would buy this third in the list. I would generally try to steer clear of this, but normally the 7020 or the 9020 is the ones I go for. Now, if you do a search for 9020 MT version, you're going to get lists of them like this. So how much should you pay for something like this? You've got to remember these are old machines and they're not going to be worth what you see here with these machines. This is $400. It's not worth $400. That's the thing. You have to remember that these are old office machines. Now, this one has been upgraded. You can see here to a new 480 gigabyte SSD. You can do that yourself. It has got 16 gigabytes of RAM in it, and it does have an i7 4790, but it's not worth $390 in my personal opinion. So I would steer clear of that sort of price. Maximum you really want to pay for these is probably around about $200 for this type of i7. Really, you don't really want to pay much more than that, I would have thought. Now, again, for some of the smaller ones, you probably want to spend around about $100 to $150 maximum on those i5s if you can get them like that. So again, you can look for cheaper ones here, and you can see this one has got an i5 4570, 16 gigabytes of RAM, 2 terabyte hard drive, plus it's also got 128 gigabyte SSD. So $249. He's done all of the hard work for you. And again, that's entirely up to you whether you want to go ahead and buy something like that. If you think it's worth that to you, all you'd have to do here is start to make some modifications like changing the power supply and putting a decent graphics card in there. You're probably going to see people online allowing you to put in a graphics card and playing them on there with that power supply. Don't do that, because that can cause a lot of problems. The power supply will get super hot and it could let go and cause you issues. And also they can catch fire, so be very careful. So you don't really want to be paying super high prices for these. So what I've done here is I've put basically the lowest price here. I've also got the Tixin Mini Tower and 16 gigabytes. If that's not so much of a concern to you, I really wouldn't sort of go for the 8 gigabyte versions. It will play games, but you really want to try to get 16 gigabytes of memory. That's really important. But you can see here, once you do that, you do start getting down to $189 for one of these systems here. So this is for an i5 4590, 16 gigabytes of RAM, 500 gigabytes of storage. And you can see it's just got not so good graphics card in here. So this guy is obviously a reseller. He's getting these and doing a little bit of tweaking to them and then selling them. You really want to stay away from these types and try to get someone who's got these and he's just done some sort of office refurb and he's trying to get rid of them dirt cheap. And if that's the ones you want to go for, really. So you can see here, these are the prices for the 920s. You can see they're all just showing the 920 versions, and that's because I've put 920 in the search box. So that's probably what you want to do there. So literally you just have to put in the name and the number of what you're looking for and it will give you the results. You can see I've put in ticks in the stuff that I want to see and basically comes up with those versions. You want to try to steer clear of these types of sellers because these are just mass produced. These are being pulled out of offices and again they're just sold as is. You can see that Pentium G3220 here. You really don't want to be paying that sort of money for this type of system. So you really want to stay clear of these. Now when searching for the 3020s, you're going to see quite a few more of these available. And you can see here, you're going to get some of the lower specs like i3s, 8 gigabytes of RAM and 500 gigabytes of hard drive. You're also going to see a lot more lower specs like the Pentium G3240. Just try and stay clear of those. And again, it just depends on what you're trying to look for in the type of Dell Optiplexes that you're trying to buy here. But these normally ones I steer clear of. Also, you're going to see a load of the 7090s and the 990s. Steer clear of these as well. These are getting really old now. You've got i5 2400s. You really don't want to be going down that road and spending $180 on something like this. I think that's just a little bit too much. But again, there's a lot of these available. These are the older ones. So you really want to steer clear of these types nowadays and go for something a little bit more modern. You are going to need a 24-pin to 8-pin cable, which is a converter cable because it has proprietary parts and cables. And that means you can change out the power supply and put in a power supply, a bit more beefier power supply, like a 500 watt or something like that, which will do you just fine. And then you can replace also the GPU then and put in a better GPU. Also, you might want to upgrade to an SSD and also RAM. If you're getting only a 4 gigabyte version or an 8 gigabyte version, you may want to put 16 gigabytes in. Again, this is all about adding cost to whatever you're paying. So if you're buying one of these systems here, now just remember that if you're spending this sort of money like this here, say for instance $236, what you're getting here is an i5, but you're only getting 500 gigabytes of hard drive storage, also 8 gigabytes of memory, and you're going to have to then probably put another 8 gigs of memory in here. So you're going to take this out and put 16 gigs of memory in, and also an SSD and a power supply, and that will start putting this over the point of buying these things in the first place. So you want to try to get these as cheap as possible. And when I say cheap, I mean cheap. If you're going to convert this into a gaming system and keep it in this case, by all means, you want to make sure there's no dents and scratches and stuff like that on the case. Again, that sort of reduces the chance of getting something decent because these are pretty old. Now, if you're going to be transferring all of the innards inside of this into a brand new case, then you're going to have to make sure that you remember that this is proprietary to Dell, and you're going to run into a few issues along the way. I've covered these in previous videos. Also, another thing to take into account when buying these is that if you buy them at, say, $236 or higher, then remember you're going to have to put in a power supply, a GPU in there, which is going to cost money, an SSD, and you may need to even upgrade the RAM because this only has 8 gigabytes of RAM. If the 4 sticks in there are 2 gigs each, which they probably are, then you're going to have to replace all of that to 16 gigs, and that's going to make the price go up even more. So just bear that in mind when you're looking at all of these things here. You want to get this as cheap as possible so you can upgrade it and still make it worth doing. Otherwise, you might as well walk away and buy something brand new like a Ryzen build or something like that. Anyway, I think that's going to be about it. That's some tips on how to choose the best Dell Optiplex for gaming, and also which Dell Optiplex you should buy and the things to look out for. Check out some of my other Dell videos if you're interested in Dells. My name has been Brian from briteccomputers.co.uk. Hope these videos help you out. I shall see you again for another video real soon. Bye for now. Now, if you haven't subscribed yet, hit the red subscribe button and then hit the bell notification button and click all to be notified when we upload new videos.